Let me ask you something that's been eating at me since I read this headline. What if everything you thought was canon wasn't? I mean, imagine sitting down to watch your favorite show, the one you've grown up with, the one you've defended through bad Christmas specials and dodgy CGI, and then being told, oops, actually, this entire run might be happening in an alternate timeline. Yeah, that's not clickbait. That's not some wild Reddit theory. That's exactly what one of the biggest Doctor Who magazines just printed about the Russell T Davies era. What fans are calling RTD2. They're claiming it might not be the canon continuation of Doctor Who. Instead, it could be an alternate branch, a timeline split, a fork, a divergent universe. And when I read that, I actually laughed at first. I thought, no way, they're trolling us. But then the more I looked into it, the scarier it got. Because if this is true, if RTD2 really is being set up as a separate timeline, then the implications are absolutely massive. It means the future of Doctor Who isn't just uncertain, it's fragmented, broken into pieces. And maybe, just maybe, deliberately so. So, let's break it down. Because I know you're thinking the same thing I am. Why would they do this? Why would Russell T Davies, the man who saved Doctor Who once before, now create a version of the show that isn't even canon? Unless, of course, that was the plan all along. Here's the problem, and it's a big one. Doctor Who has always thrived on canon flexibility. Time travel, regenerations, alternate realities, they've built the show on shaky ground. But in the past few years, they've taken that shakiness and turned it into chaos. We had the timeless child revelation, which rewrote the Doctor's entire origin. We had generation, splitting the Doctor into two. And now this, a magazine flat out saying RTD2 might be happening in a completely separate timeline. And I know what you're about to say, James. It's just a magazine. They exaggerate. They hype stuff up. But that's the thing. These magazines don't drop lines like this by accident. They're controlled. They're fed information directly from the BBC and the showrunners. If they're planting the seed that this new era might be alternate, it's because they want fans to consider it. They want that thought in your head. Let me throw a curveball here. What if this was their safety net? Think about it. If RTD2 goes badly, if fans reject Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, if Billie Piper's regeneration twist blows up in their face, they can just say, oh, don't worry, that wasn't the real timeline anyway. That's not canon, it was just one branch, one experiment, one alternate reality, and then bam, they pivot back, reboot, or reset without consequences. It's almost like they're testing us. Testing how far they can push canon before we snap. But here's where the forbidden knowledge creeps in. Because if we go back, digging through interviews, convention panels, even offhand jokes from Russell T Davies, there's a pattern. He's always hinted that canon is flexible, that stories are myths, that none of this is set in stone. So when he comes back, why wouldn't he lean into that even harder? Why wouldn't he create a sandbox timeline where he can play, experiment, and then walk away if it burns down? And this is the part that really got me. What if we're not watching Doctor Who's future at all? What if we're watching a side reality, a spin-off timeline disguised as the main one? That would mean that every emotional beat, every shocking twist, none of it actually counts in the real Doctor Who. That's not just controversial, that's dangerous. Because what's the point of investing if you're constantly told, by the way, this might not matter? Before I go deeper into that rabbit hole, I need to stop here and say this. If you're watching this and your mind is already spinning the way mine is, you're exactly the kind of person I make these videos for. You live for this breakdown of hidden truths and forbidden knowledge. And if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, now is literally the moment to do it. Because I guarantee, the things I'm about to reveal in the next sections, you won't find anywhere else. So let's dig deeper. Because buried inside this alternate timeline claim is something darker, something they're not saying out loud. And it's this: if RTD2 isn't canon, then what is? Here's the thing. If you tell fans that RTD2 is an alternate timeline, you're not just making a cute little footnote in a magazine. You're opening a Pandora's box that can't be shut. Because now, every scene, every regeneration, Every plot twist in this new era comes with an asterisk. A silent question mark hovering above it, but does this count? And that's lethal to a show like Doctor Who. Because say what you want about wobbly sets, clunky scripts, or dodgy effects, the thing that's kept fans loyal for 60 years is the weight of canon. The idea that, love it or hate it, the story matters. That what happened with the first Doctor still resonates in the 15th. That Gallifrey burning in 2005 still echoes in 2025. Break that chain, and suddenly, Doctor Who isn't a legacy. It's fan fiction with a budget. And maybe that's what Russell T Davies wants. I know that's a dangerous sentence to say out loud, but think about it. In interview after interview, he's described Doctor Who as a myth. A story told around a campfire. Something where contradictions don't matter. That's a beautiful metaphor. Until you realize what it really means. Canon is disposable. If a story contradicts another, so what? Just tell the new one. And if that's the case, then yes, RTD2 being an alternate timeline isn't an accident, it's a strategy. But let's not kid ourselves. Fans have noticed. The backlash has already begun. Scroll through the forums, the subreddits, the comment sections, and you'll see it. People saying, so what, none of this counts now? Ncuti isn't the real Doctor. Billie Piper's regeneration isn't canon. Then why am I watching? And that's the danger of this safety net. It's supposed to protect the franchise from failure, but it might actually accelerate the collapse. Because let's be honest, Doctor Who has been in trouble for a while. The Disney deal looked like salvation, and now it's collapsing. Merchandise sales have dipped. The viewing figures aren't the powerhouse they used to be. And instead of stabilizing things, they've doubled down on generations, alternate timelines, canon resets. It's like watching a drowning swimmer thrash around and pull themselves under faster. And here's the most chilling part. If this magazine is right, if RTD2 explicitly being positioned as an alternate timeline, then what happens to our Doctor? To the mainline canon Doctor, who we've been following for 60 years? Does that story just stop? Does it go into hibernation while we play in Russell's sandbox? Or is there something bigger waiting? A reset button? A reboot? A master plan that we haven't seen yet? Let me drop a theory here, because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The generation wasn't a gimmick. It was a mechanism. A literal split point. The Doctor dividing into two wasn't just a fun final twist. It was the creation of two timelines. One we're watching now, with Ncuti and Billie Piper. And another hidden, waiting, untouched, preserved. That's the real timeline. That's the BBC's insurance policy. And one day, they'll come back to it. But here's the question nobody's asking: why hide that? Why not just admit RTD2 is a fun spin-off? A what-if universe, a side reality? Why package it as the main Doctor Who if you know it isn't? The answer's uncomfortable, but it's obvious. Money. Because if they admitted this wasn't the main timeline, fans wouldn't invest. Disney wouldn't invest. Netflix wouldn't invest. So they disguise it. They call it Doctor Who. They put the branding on it. But quietly, behind the scenes, they plant these seeds. Magazine articles, vague interviews, Canon dodging lines, so that when they need to pivot, they can shrug and say, well, we never said it was the real one, did we? And if that doesn't make your stomach drop, think about what that means for the next few years. Because if we're not in the real Doctor Who, then everything you're watching is temporary, disposable, a placeholder until they decide what to do with the real timeline. And that, more than anything, makes me wonder, have we been tricked into watching the biggest decoy in television history? Now, before I continue, let me pause and loop you in. Because I need to know, what do you think? Do you see RTD2 as canon? Or do you believe, deep down, that it's the safety net timeline? Drop it in the comments, because this is the kind of debate that defines fandom. But don't go anywhere. Because in the next part, I'm going to expose the receipts. The interviews, the hidden quotes, the little throwaway lines from Russell T Davies and others that prove this isn't paranoia. They've been telling us all along. We just weren't listening. We've talked about theory. We've talked about backlash. But now it's time to pull out the receipts. Because this whole alternate timeline thing, it didn't just appear out of nowhere in that magazine article. It's been there, hiding in plain sight. Let's start with Russell T Davies himself. The man loves to play coy, but listen carefully to his words. Back in interviews around the 60th anniversary, he said things like, "Doctor Who is a myth. It contradicts itself, and that's part of the fun." A harmless comment, right? Until you realize it's code. Because if contradictions don't matter, then canon doesn't matter. And if canon doesn't matter, then calling RTD2 an alternate timeline is just the natural conclusion. Then, there's that infamous comment where he described the B generation as brand new tool for the future of Doctor Who. Think about that. Not a story beat, not a one-off twist. A tool, something you keep in the toolbox, something you'll use again. Why? Because it wasn't about storytelling, it was about splitting the timeline. Creating a safety valve where you can run two versions of the Doctor at once, or quietly walk one back if the experiment fails. And it gets weirder. A few months ago, in another magazine piece, RTD joked about how fans shouldn't get too hung up on official canon. Because, quote, Doctor Who exists in infinite versions. At the time, people brushed it off. But now, paired with this new alternate timeline headline, it looks less like a joke and more like a mission statement. But here's where it really hits. The latest magazine piece didn't just say RTD2 was an alternate timeline once. It used the phrase repeatedly. It positioned it as a framework. And that word choice matters. Because alternate timeline isn't just a fun metaphor, it's a label. It says, this isn't the real road, this is the detour. And if they're willing to print that in an official magazine, with BBC oversight, then you know it wasn't an accident. That phrasing got approved. It was deliberate. Now, here's where I go a step darker. Because this isn't the first time the BBC has played this game. Think back to the unbound audios from Big Finish. What if stories, alternate doctors, parallel realities? They were deliberately labeled as non-canon playgrounds. And fans loved them for what they were. But here's the twist: back then, the BBC made sure to ring-fence those stories. They were explicit: this isn't the main thing, this is a side thing. With RTD2, the opposite is happening. They're presenting the side thing as the main dish, and only afterwards are they quietly slipping in words alternate. And doesn't that feel calculated? Like they're trying to have it both ways. Cash in on the Doctor Who brand by saying this is the real show, while planting little breadcrumbs to walk it back if they need to. It's plausible deniability, baked into canon itself. Let me bring in one more piece of evidence. Remember Ncuti Gatwa's comment at the BAFTAs? He said, "I don't even know if I'm the real Doctor anymore." At the time, it seemed like a playful wink to the bit generation. But now, read it again. That's not a joke. That's the truth creeping out. He literally admitted, in plain sight, that his version of the Doctor might not be the real one. And fans laughed, shrugged, moved on. But now, with the magazine calling RTD2 an alternate timeline, it suddenly looks like foreshadowing. So let's connect the dots. RTD says contradictions don't matter, canon is optional. RTD calls B generation a tool. Timeline splitting is intentional. Official magazines start branding RTD2 as alternate. It's being framed that way internally. Ncuti himself hints he may not be the real Doctor. The actors are in on the bit. At this point, the pattern is undeniable. They've been seeding this for months. And now it's starting to come into focus. But here's the most important question: why now? Why leak this in the middle of an already chaotic moment for the franchise? The Disney Plus deal collapsed.